Hey all, I'm Matt Reardon. It's Tuesday, August 26th. I'm starting the video here with a radar loop across the desert southwest yesterday morning. It restarts. It's going to do that in just a second. There we go. The monsoon was cranking yesterday. It's had this lull in 2025. It's been weaker. We've been waiting for this uptick in activity even into some of the low deserts, and we saw it yesterday. Maybe a banner day for the 2025 monsoon season with just tremendous thunderstorm activity. We had flash flood watches for a number of metro areas to start the day in the morning. Those translated in a well-forecasted flash flood warning threat that materialized later. We saw severe thunderstorm warnings through Southern California during midday with some of these stronger thunderstorm cells you can see going up. Those launched an outflow boundary and strong wind gusts that moved through the Phoenix area. And associated with that, we saw this large dust storm or haboob move through, again, south central Arizona. Just ominous to see when this actually came through the city. There were strong wind gusts reported, even some power flashes and power outages associated with this. This picture and video just taken from the airport in Phoenix, the international airport there. Man, that is more than ominous looking, even if you look closely. Earlier in the day, it was these thunderstorms, some of these even severe warned, that laid down that outflow boundary, kicking up that dust, right, as it moved through the desert, and just launching that into Phoenix there. Ominous sights. Even saw some severe reports. We looked across the country yesterday. Where were they? Well, aside from northern Massachusetts, down in south central Arizona, right in that kind of Phoenix area, and even some significant wind reports in Southern California associated with some of these severe thunderstorms. It's always kind of neat about the monsoon is as it goes up, you have a lot of this moisture, really more so kind of oddly over the desert southwest. This is kind of the one time of year we expect rainfall in that area. Not too much of it, but it is, the regime. And the moisture struggles to get across the coastal ranges of California. And what I mean by that is there's this kind of 3,000 to 7,000 foot mountain range, even kind of peaks out at like 8, maybe 9,000 feet near Los Angeles. And that just puts this big like barrier on this moisture coming up from the Baja. So when you'll watch these monsoon thunderstorms go up east of the mountains, they actually struggle. They almost never get over towards San Diego and some of these large metro areas. I mean, here's Los Angeles County. So this time of year, you'll see thunderstorms, 10, 20 miles away from some of these large metro areas. You'll see pictures like this from San Diego with those large thunderstorms going up just on the other side of the mountain here, but that moisture can't get across that high mountain range. So you see these anvils go up not far away from this picture taken from San Diego County. And these thunderstorms just over the hill, but not making it over to San Diego or Los Angeles here. Some of them occasionally will blow up on the other side, but it doesn't happen too often there. The monsoon, I love it. It's always cool to see when it goes up. We hope for, no major flash flooding or severe issues. But the satellite pictures, the reports sent in, it's neat to see. Talked about that desert rainfall. This is an area, especially down here, what we call the lower Colorado River Valley. It kind of snakes through the Grand Canyon, through the border of California and Arizona, kind of ends down here. And this corridor does not receive a lot of rain annually. This is about the only time of year that we expect it. And they got a lot of it yesterday, up to 1 inch or more in some of these locations, probably localized areas that got up and over 2 inches of rainfall, like 2 to 3 inches of rainfall. You're talking about they're almost at their annual average total. And then a wider area, the Snake River Valley over toward Colorado, Utah, western Nevada near Reno, the east side of the Sierra Nevada, and just a widespread monsoon event yesterday. By zooming on some of these cities here, this is Imperial, California. If you're wondering where that is, it's way down here, again, east of those mountain ranges. So in this regime for the monsoon, I mentioned annual rainfall. They get like 3 or 4 rainfall here in this part of southeastern California. And just yesterday, over an inch. So there's that weak monsoon that we've seen this year with, no activity July onward, and finally just made up the entire deficit in 1 day's worth of rainfall. It's not kind of an uncommon regime in this part of the country. You can see in the past, these last years are plotted on here, these big upticks this time of year where they can get a lot of their annual budget of rainfall from literally one thunderstorm. It's not uncommon. Similar phenomenon for Phoenix, Arizona. They get a little bit more rainfall annually. You're talking up near 7 inches of rainfall. Still not a lot, but this is the time of year we expect it. You can see that slope and the cumulative normals there. And we did get some yesterday, but with those dying thunderstorms, they lost some of their luster, at least precipitation-wise, when they came through the city, more so a wind event, but it did get them a little bit closer to average and what's otherwise been this kind of weak monsoon season if you compare it to some of these years past, like 2021 or 2022, when they accrued a lot more precipitation in this July to August corridor. If we zoom out and look at the national radar here this morning, we often see sometimes with some of the stronger monsoon activity that we'll get Some moisture spreading east into the southern plains. We've seen that here this week. Monday and Tuesday, there's southern Oklahoma with heavier rain showers moving through. We were kind of rooting for this to get into the middle Mississippi Valley last week, looking at some of the forecasts. I think this will continue. We'll look at this here today. The forecast going into Wednesday and Thursday, kind of this corridor here, expecting more precipitation. We're also watching a little bit of a low sneak around here into Canada, and that's likely to yield some showers, maybe even some thunderstorms, maybe over like the eastern Midwest, the Great Lakes region here, which we'll look at in just a second. I want to go big picture and show you what we're looking at in terms of the jet stream, just going up at the 500 millibar wind map. And this is, kind of your textbook, near textbook monsoon flow in the jet stream this time of year in July or August, when we see these large northwest ridges, heat pumping into Canada, heat pumping into the northwest, where we saw extreme heat warnings posted for portions of Washington and Oregon yesterday. And as you build heat here, this area warms up quicker than anywhere else. And that heat, at the surface, especially over these high kind of mountainous regions, rises quickly into the atmosphere. And that creates what we call a meso low. Think of like drawing an L here, and that draws up air from the south to fill in that low pressure, that vacuum in the lower atmosphere. So you'll literally see the wind kind of rush in here. You can see that a little bit here on the 500 millibar height map. And as it does that, it's going to pull up either Atlantic or Pacific moisture out of the Baja that just kind of sits down here this time of year, pulls that into the desert southwest, and that's how we get a lot of that source for rainfall and thunderstorms during this monsoon season. So when we see this heat build into here, extreme heat warnings get posted in this corridor up into Canada, we know we have a pretty good chance at a monsoon, and then let alone, a little upper level trough here helping to funnel even more of that moisture into this corridor here. So this pattern continues today. And as a result of that, if I play this 3 kilometer NAM simulated radar forecast going forward, taking it through this morning into this afternoon, we see a big uptick in that afternoon thunderstorm activity over Nevada, eastern California, southeastern Arizona, up into Utah, especially the Snake River Valley later this evening. So it kind of parks. Look at all the showers and thunderstorm activity over the Snake River, over Idaho, the Treasure Valley, and eastern Oregon. Flood watches posted for this corridor here. Might see those get expanded further to the east in the upper Snake River Valley. I'm talking almost Yosemite at this point. Yellowstone, not Yosemite. Yosemite's over here. Get my national park Y names right. And then if we go further into the forecast, again, with that monsoon activity, sometimes we see these plumes of moisture come into the southern plains, Oklahoma, Kansas, pushing into Arkansas, southern Missouri. Again, this is taking us out through Wednesday night into Thursday morning. And then this other feature we have to talk about is over here in the eastern Pacific. And we'll look at that in just a second here. Jump over and look at satellite here. This is the tropical storm that we're watching. I believe this is Juliet on our Eastern Pacific names list here. Kind of a weak tropical storm right now. You can see it doesn't have kind of a clear defined rotating thunderstorms around it that would maybe give it an eye, something closer to hurricane strength. But it is lofting some Pacific moisture up into the upper atmosphere. So we're going to watch this through the forecast period to see if it can get some moisture and rainfall and kind of this outflow plume across Southern California, southwestern Arizona, maybe another source of kind of this late season moisture. Some of this rainfall, I'm not confident that you see plotted here from the 3 kilometer NAM is going to make it all the way to the ground. It's got a lot of dry air to fall through because a lot of this is kind of in the mid-levels of the atmosphere as it gets lifted up by these stronger storms. And so we'll see, we'll watch here as we go into maybe Wednesday and Thursday to see if we can get some moisture returned out of that little system that's lofting to the west. It's expected to weaken Juliet here, given the colder waters in the eastern Pacific as it moves further to the north. But nonetheless, another source of moisture here. I'm going to back this forecast up because there's that low pressure system I talked about. That swings through. You can see some showers here weekly over northern Illinois, eastern Iowa. This would be tomorrow afternoon. Central Minnesota. And through the night, then into Thursday morning, you can see some showers and thunderstorm activity over Lake Erie, Huron. This is now Thursday, 1 p.m. All these showers are ongoing here over northern Arkansas. So some of the areas in here need some of this rainfall. This is not going to be a lot of it, unfortunately. Might get a rumble or thunder too, maybe approaching a quarter to a half inch of the strongest storms. But for some dry acreage here in the middle Mississippi Valley, some dry acreage here in the eastern, northeastern, like Corn Belt, let's call it that area. Hoping to squeeze as much moisture out as we can out of this next kind of 48-hour system here. If we look big picture at the Atlantic, just looking at the infrared satellite imagery this morning, there's really not much to talk about. We talked last week, even the week before that, how we expected as we went through the end of August, started going into maybe like early September, we'd see a lull in tropical activity. And that's been the case. We do have weak, kind of almost remnant Fernand spinning as a tropical storm. That's completely lost thunderstorm activity. If you look very closely, you can actually see these spinning clouds here, totally exposed just off the surface of the ocean. So that's moving out to sea. That's not a threat. We do have a little system we've been keeping an eye on in the Caribbean Sea here. But as these storms get further west in let's call this kind of the main Caribbean Sea here, I call this the Southern Caribbean death zone, because you just don't get a lot of development historically with how fast the trade winds move through there. It's not conducive for great tropical development, and that's the case for the system here as it moves further toward the west through that sea. What I am looking at on this map that is just as important to our forecast is look at the jet stream flow cranking along that southern corridor. We mentioned the shower activity expected through here underneath that flow. That is associated with this cold front that's plunging through the southeast and the eastern U.S., bringing those cooler temperatures. This is an infrared plot, so it's really showing us sensible heat coming off these returns from the satellite here. And so what we can see is in these darker, like black colors, you see these here over the ocean, that's the warm sea surface that it's looking at here. It's capturing some dust just off the ocean surface here over Africa, which is a little bit cooler. So that's why you see that kind of like lighter gray color. Do you notice this like lighter color over here over the Midwest compared to this darker color here over the Caribbean or like near Bermuda? That's because we're colder here. That cold front has moved through and it's actually showing up on the infrared satellite imagery, which we use to kind of catch some of these cloud cover here. And so if we jump over and look at minimum temperatures just here this morning, I mean, we're down into the 40s across the Midwest, 50s across the Mid-South, over toward eastern Pennsylvania, New York, all the way over to the southern and northern plains down into the 50s here, if not the low 40s. An impressive cold shot here for Tuesday morning. The heat is still to the northwest. Talked about that monsoon influence. And then if we go into Wednesday, and Thursday, spreading all the way over to the Atlantic coast, and the Gulf Coast states, 60s, all the way across kind of the Atlantic coastline here. Texas starting to warm back up a little bit, but even Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, I mean, cool all the way through the weekend for this quarter here. Those are just the overnight temperatures. You can see the heat staying to the west. If we jump over and look at, this is the NDFD, the National Weather Service forecast for high temperatures here. This is Tuesday. Heat continues in the west, where we still have heat advisories posted. Look at how cool we are, especially under that cloud cover emanating through that southern corridor there. If we take this into Wednesday, and then Thursday, you can see where that rain's forecasted on Thursday. Look at that. Much cooler high temperature expected there. Some heat trying to build back into Texas, but now those cooler temperatures, at least in terms of those daytime highs, pushing all the way over the Pacific coast now, losing a lot of that kind of intense heat across the Pacific Northwest, which is good to see. Man, by like Friday and Saturday, talking about a pretty pleasant day outside of some of this precip here, expected across a very wide area of the continental U.S. And that continues all the way out into early next week. We talked about this cool pattern looked to be extended. We can't shake it. I think in the long-range forecast, I used that terminology yesterday. So it's been impressive to kind of see it unfold in some of the more near-term forecasts here as we've come up to the event. And I think maybe the most important piece of the forecast, at least as it relates to even going through this weekend and into next week in the long term, is going to be this feature here in the North Pacific. So let's keep our eye as we go through this 500 millibar height forecast from the ECMWF. I'm watching this area here, kind of in the upstream part of our pattern. We see the trough here over Illinois, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania. That's keeping those cool temperatures here today. This is Tuesday. I'm going to make this valid as of like Tuesday afternoon. Here's that upper level ridge, which is parked over British Columbia. That's brought the heat into this area. We have this little upper level low. We have this perfect regime for the monsoon continuing here today over the Four Corners, the interior west, Idaho, eastern Oregon. But I'm going to take the forecast out. We're watching this area here. This is now Thursday, Friday, Saturday. We still have this troughing here over the eastern U.S. We have a little bit of a ridging trying to build back into Texas. We talked about some of that heat trying to build back in at the end of this week. Still have that ridge over Canada. I'm going to take it forward. And this is now Sunday. Let's take it to Sunday afternoon. And I'm watching this feature here very closely. This is what we call, in meteorology, an omega block. So if I follow the jet stream flow around it, which is low, high, low, do that again, you'll notice that I'm drawing the Greek letter omega in the flow. Looks something like that, the uppercase omega. And we call these omega blocks because they tend to block up the atmosphere. They tend to block the flow. And they tend to entrench the downstream pattern in whatever it's been for the next considerable few days. I mean, you're talking maybe 5 days, can sometimes be 7, can be 14 or more. But this pattern, when it shows up, and it's showing up in all the models here, this is the ECMWF AIFS, which has performed well kind of in this kind of 7 to 14 day range. This tells us we're probably not going to shake this cool pattern for some time. It's August 26th. We might be seeing it well into the early part of September. When I take the forecast forward, I mean, this is now Sunday, Monday, Tuesday the 2nd, Wednesday the 3rd. I mean, look at that trough that's now even further intensified across the central U.S. and the eastern U.S. from the AFS. And we still have this high over low, this upper level ridge over a low pressure. We call this more of a Rex block, but functionally does the same thing, keeps this pattern parked here. Now I'm all the way a week later, Friday, September 5th, the 6th, there's that Rex block. So we've gone from a Omega block to a Rex block. The 8th, the 9th, and we really don't see any sort of break in the heat, the cool, I should say, until we start to get out to like the second week of September when we start to build some subtropical ridging back into here. And that would help us turn over much wetter in the Midwest if it comes to fruition. The problem is that's a 15-day forecast at this point. Can't put too much weight into that. And so what does that mean? Well, our temperatures, if we look over the next 5 days from the ECMWF, averaged cooler across the central and eastern part of the country, warmer over Canada, warmer across the Northwest, albeit not as extensive as it was over the last 48 hours. But I take it to the 5 to 10 day, and we're still cool. And we're warm across the Northwest, Alberta, British Columbia, getting over to Saskatchewan, Manitoba. What about if I go the whole 10 days, the next 10 days? Cool here, warm to the Northwest. Next 6 to 10 days from the Climate Prediction Center, cool in the central and eastern part of the country, save more southern regions out of the influence of that trough, warm across the Northwest. 10-day precipitation anomalies from the ECMWF. Well, with that ridge here, parked to our east, with this little troughing getting in here, we talked about that tropical storm, helping to pump moisture into the Four Corners states, even some of the high plains, Nebraska, Southwest, South Dakota. Look at Wyoming, Idaho, portions of southwestern Montana, into the southern high plains of Texas. And then this little corridor of flow along that jet stream where some of these showers are going to make their way all the way over toward the Gulf Coast states, if not Florida here, but pretty dry over a rather wide area here. This has been like a repeat shape that I've been drawing in the forecast here. We've been dry through the corridor of where that trough has been diving in, bringing that drier Canadian air. So I'll have to continue to contend with this. We are seeing that little low move through in the forecast, and we're going to see another one of these next week as potentially that deeper trough tries to build in. If I take this from the ECMWF AIFS, we'll take it through again. Let's go through this weekend. You'll notice Sunday, Monday. So going to Tuesday, there's this little trough here moving through Minnesota. By Wednesday, it deepens over Iowa and Illinois. That's probably our next best chance of precipitation in this corridor, but it's not enough to shake this kind of even drier signal from the ECMWF. So there is some rainfall falling in the forecast here. If we were bone dry, you'd look at colors more so like this that we're seeing over Pennsylvania, Virginia, North Carolina. So expecting some rain in this corridor. Middle part of next week, we'll look at that here from the ECMWF forecast. I'm going to take this through today quickly. There's that monsoon activity expected over Arizona, Utah, a number of the west states. Another one of these plumes of moisture through Kansas, Oklahoma here as we go in through tomorrow evening. You can see that set up, even southwestern Missouri. As we go into Thursday, that spreads across southern Missouri, the Ozarks, northern Arkansas. We saw that in the temperature forecast for this quarter here, going over much cooler on Thursday. That overspreads the middle Mississippi River Valley, an area, again, that's been very dry here of late, before pushing across the Gulf Coast states on Friday. Pushing through Florida, portions of the Carolinas now on Saturday. Sunday, seeing a little system here try to wrap up on the high plains, east of the divide. Weekly pushing out east, not seeing anything else until that system comes through on Tuesday. And by Wednesday, tries to bring some precipitation into the Midwest, Wisconsin, Iowa, Missouri, all the way back toward Kansas City, Illinois. Wednesday evening, pushing through quickly on Thursday. So not a huge rainmaker, but it is something out into the middle of next week to keep our eye on. If we look further into the forecast here, even looking out 8 to 14 days from the ECMWF ensemble, the AAFS and the GFS ensemble, with that subtropical ridging, we've seen that in a few models try to build back in kind of south to north here. That's going to try to pull some of this flow out of the southern plains into the Midwest. We see that maybe more so in the GFS ensemble into the Ohio River Valley. Don't see it as much on the AFS. See it a little bit here from the ECMWF and ENS, and that's going to try to bring temperatures up. But this is well out in the forecast. We're talking like well into September at this point. This forecast is for the 3rd through the 9th. And we can see the CPC is not ignoring that either, with some of the southern plains rains trying to get pulled up into the Ohio Valley, even the Midwest here. As we go through that first week of September, maybe near the end of that first week, we see some break from the cooler weather and some precipitation to come in. But looking long range, looking beyond that toward middle September, as Eric did yesterday, Latest forecast from the ECMWF continues to show that jump from the MJO from where we've been, which has been phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, jumping through the phase space back toward phase 8 or 1. And if not, maybe even living over here in the long range. The BOM model showed maybe more of a quick transition from phase 5, 6, and 7. It may have been a Kelvin wave anyway, the influence of which we still don't fully understand. But either way, most models take it by early September back toward phase 8, 1, or 2. And we can see this just from the ECMWF if we look at the velocity potential. So this shows us that at least right now here at the end of this week, the MJO is living here, or phase 2 and 3, near the maritime continent, eastern Indian Ocean. That's where all this rising motion and lift is in the atmosphere, sinking here over the Atlantic. This tends to be suppressive of tropical storm development. And this area here, which is why I showed you that infrared satellite, not much to look at. As I take the forecast forward, we're now September 1st through the 6th. Now September, let's do the 2nd through the 7th. Well, now that's suppression for tropical activity, more so over the central and western Pacific. And we see kind of next to it, what goes down goes up in the atmosphere, what goes up goes down. So outside of this, we see promotion for ascent over the Indian Ocean, now starting to get promotion for ascent over the Atlantic. At least not suppression, which starts to wane as we go into early September. That's that MJO trying to move over phase 8, 1, 2, 3. And again, Eric showed this yesterday. We look at those analogs in the middle part of September. Let's jump over and I'm going to start with phase 8 for that first week of September. There's that ridge over the North Pacific. Maybe even a low underneath it. There's that, maybe even a block that we saw in the forecast from the AFS. If we look at phase 8 at the end of August, if we get there even sooner, you see ridging over the northwest, troughing over the part of the country, but really seeing it more so. We saw that forecast was more the 1st through the 7th. And so let's do phase 8 in early September here. Ridging over the northwest, troughing over the middle part of the country. What if we get into phase 1? Troughing in early September. Let's take this out through September 18th if we get into phase 1. Ridging across the northwest or the southwest, troughing in the central or eastern part of the country, ridging over the Canadian Maritimes. I mean, that's a familiar pattern that we saw earlier this summer at times that kept the heat reduced at times in the middle part of the country, especially over the plains and the western Corn Belt here. So the analog pattern from the MJO, let's look at phase 2. There it is. That warm east, warm west, cool in the middle. I mean, it looks like summer, surprisingly, where we had cooler temperatures at times during the peak of the heat this year. Some heat waves that did build into here periodically, but by and large, didn't see a ton of heat, averaged out over the whole summer in this middle part of the country here over the plains. So seeing that signal in the MJO for the middle of September. And if we look at the ECMWF extended forecast, it actually kind of parks the MJO over here in phase 2 for an extended period of time next month as well. So maybe looking at even a cooler September, similar to where we're seeing at the end of August. We can actually look at a purely MJO-based forecast that looks, just at analogs for the MJO, kind of, in the same thought exercise that we just performed. And if I take that forecast out into September 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, I'm taking to the 15th, 16th, 17th. I'm looking here. Here's North America. Ridging northwest, troughing over the middle and eastern part of the country. This is all the way out September 18th. And this continues even through the end of the month here. I don't think we're going to have a trough parked over, Springfield, Missouri for 25 days. But it does show the potential, at least in the historical analogs, for cooler temperatures in the middle part of August. Does that mean we're going to get an early frost? It's too hard to say at this point. But at least if you're going to ask me if it's now elevated as a risk in the middle part or late part of September versus other years, I'd have to say yes to that. So we'll continue to watch the signal going forward. I will say if there's two things that are going to mess with this forecast more than anything, one would be we get a huge storm out of the East Pacific. There's still some activity predicted here. We're still in the hurricane season. So we get a very large hurricane that starts to pull some of this ridging and puts one here that could disrupt that block that we talked about in the 7 to 10 day forecast. So we'll be watching that area here. We're at, I think, Juliet right now. I'm going to confirm that really quickly. Just make sure I got the right name. But yep, Juliet, I've been saying that. So if we get one of these systems develops a little bit stronger than expected, that could mess up that trough ridge pattern. And then coincidentally, if we get a very strong system, let's go back over to, let's just get a global view. We go over, Eric showed this yesterday. Those trade winds that are cranking over here in the central Pacific, helping to reignite La Nina. If we get a very large typhoon in the North Pacific that recurves, that could also disrupt that block. Not seeing it right now. In fact, over the next kind of 10 days, that Atlantic suppression that we've seen tamp down tropical development near us, or at least near the U.S. in the eastern part of the country, is heading over here. So that should suppress development and reduce that chance, but you can't rule it out. So those are two things we'll be watching to put a fork in the road in this forecast. We'll talk about that more as we go through the week. Eric will talk with you all tomorrow morning. As for today, appreciate the time. Thanks for watching.